Welcome to another edition to Talking Wit, WIT, Kevin and Son. This is a very special episode. 2024, I decided to create a special edition of my podcast of 100 of my closest friends that had a secret and wanted to share their secret to their success. I often say that whatever your objective is in life, successful people, they create a framework around their day-to-day life that enhances their life. This podcast will reveal the secrets to highly effective lives of people that are in my life. Today, our guests will share not only their story, but simple, doable steps that will turn bad habits into good habits and mastering small behaviors that leads to big outcome. Today's guest, she has over 2 decades of clinical experience with a wealth of insight and expertise in the field of mental health. Her story not only will include her clinical learning, but her brushstroke on life is wide as she has significantly spread her wisdom over the realm of academia. All right, that's my TBI talking at the graduate level in courses. She is the inspiration behind the podcast, Peace Pathfinders. Hopefully, I got that right. Today, you will learn about how to disconnect from your chaos and unite your life through creativity and peace. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome good friend, one of the highly effective, successful people that I have in my life, Dr. Jodi Bremer. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thank you very much for having me. I'm doing all right today. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here.
It's my honor, and the conversation of mental health is an ongoing subject, especially coming out of COVID. I know for me, um, I it's a daily conversation of mine because sometimes people don't understand when I forget a word or can't find a word in the back of my mind. Is that I've gotten tired of explaining to everyone that I had suffered a major concussion in 2018
Yeah.
and that I live with a new acronym called TBI, traumatic brain injury, and that I am, well, like I said, I am living with it. People struggle with mental health, especially coming out of COVID. And so part of the reason I have you on here is to do a deep dive into that and talk about how you've come out on the other side and have discovered peace where there's chaos in most of our lives. So, Jodi, I'm a Southern boy, so I have to ask permission to call you by your first name. So if you'll be so kind, do I have permission to address you by Jodi?
Yes, absolutely.
Will you be so kind to tell our listeners before we dive into your podcast, your craft, your expertise, um, your life story? How did you come about all of this knowledge?
Yes. And so first I just wanted to thank you for just sharing about the TBI and COVID too, because I feel like we don't talk enough about COVID and the aftermath, as well. And I can also just relate. I actually have had a TBI myself, and it's not always talked about. So I think it takes a lot of bravery just to even bring that up. So I do appreciate that in you. So I just wanted to tell you that.
I appreciate that. I only bring it up because I get criticized all the time by how many times I say how many times I do this and whatever. And Tony Robbins said that if people are counting how many times you say or pause or look at your notes, they're not listening to what you're saying. He says just F it and move on. So I've taken that advice from someone greater than me. And but I think the only way that we are going to help people is that people see people living successfully with it,
Hmm.
tell their stories. And that's the reason why I bring it up.
Absolutely. And I think it just kind of goes into just human suffering and just how prevalent that is, in a number of ways and how it can affect us, from a personal level, just as far as things we might be going through in life, maybe work-related stress or relationships or things kind of going on to like those moments in time that are life-changing, whether it's a TBI or divorce or marriage or having a child or extending outward if we're thinking of like the community and the world as far as the pandemic, like you just shared, or whether it's discrimination or violence and crime or the different things that affect our communities and our world, and so it's certainly all different kinds of levels as far as like human suffering. And I think it's just so important to be able to bring that to the surface, to be able to talk about it and to kind of connect as well. Especially since anxiety and depression is rampant, and I feel like there's more isolation and disconnection more than ever these days.
Now, since you brought it up, the hard part is creating a conversation. And I know with your story, there's a backstory with you having to overcome some struggles. Um, because a lot of times when we are going through our own mess, we
Mhm.
often feel like we're the only persons going through it until we hear stories like yours. So let's go ahead and peel back one of the layers of your story as how did you get involved in this arena of mental health and finding peace? Where does your story begin?
My story. Yeah, so I'm a psychologist. I'm practicing in private practice, and really I think it's gone on kind of throughout my entire life. And I think one of the biggest things, and it sounds simple, but it's just wanting to always answer that question of why. Like why do people behave this way? Why do I behave this way? And always just kind of very curious about this. And I feel like the more I learn, the less I know, and as like throughout life, and to be able to like help people if I could, along their own paths and journey, and just kind of being a stepping stone, in that process, has been so important. And then just as far as like on a personal level, life happens, and the last few years have been really challenging for me in so many ways. And there's just a moment where it just like felt relentless and overwhelming, and I just didn't know what to do anymore. And I just kind of asked myself a simple question as far as like, what do I need? Like, what do I need right now? And then it kind of like came to me. It was just a really like a big turning point for me. Is like, I just needed peace and connection. I think that connection was so important to me as well. But that just led to a slew of other questions. Like, what does that even mean? How do I define peace? And so yeah, I just had more and more questions come up. Here we are again with the more I learn, the less I know, and the kind of working definition I came up with is with regards to peace is just kind of that inner peace or maybe emotional state or feeling within that we can come to. But also I think of it outwardly too, as far as in our relationships and how there seems to be a relationship between our inner and outer world and achieving that hopefully balance with peace, although it's not static either, it's always changing. And so I really see that as just a desire and commitment to like helping cultivate inner peace and then outer peace within our relationships, communities, and the world. And I certainly see this great need, not just for myself, because my story isn't unique, in and of itself, but I see it all over the place. And the people that I talk to and what I see in the news or on TV are all over, and I just see that we're thirsty for this like connection, especially too.
Now, do you believe um, everyone wants peace, or we all need peace? I know that you strive to cultivate a connection and disconnect from all the drama in the world. But you brought it up earlier. Coming out of COVID, what do we have to deal? What did we deal with? We dealt with being isolated. We dealt with dealing with relationships that we hadn't quite cultivated and developed. We had to deal with, the dilemma of exposing our kids to be basically incarcerated for a period of time without sentencing.
Mm-hmm.
We also had to struggle with how are we going to live our lives if this is the way life is going to be. It was bleak for most of us, and then we had to deal with the drama of the world. Politics came in world, racism resurfaced and came back, with a vengeance. The opposite to peace is conflict, and all of a sudden we go back to the rest of the world. I know at one point the world for 2 weeks created balance. We had plants that hadn't been seen for years that showed up. Our oceans that were struggling with pollution start to cleanse itself. We had rain in the desert where it hadn't rained before, and we
Right.
had calm. We silenced the noise, and then all of a sudden we went back to chaos again.
Sure.
How do we deal with that? And how where does peace lie within the noise? Where does peace lie within being irritated conflict, and we're all so sensitive right now because we have what the cancel culture, so we're all offended by something. Where does peace land?
That's a good question. And I think that's a big part of this too. And I feel like the definition of peace, similar to like how we might define love, might be different for every person, or I might be expressed differently. I think, and this is where I'd like us to come to the table to have more of these discussions, because you bring up a really good question, and like, because I think it's almost impossible to talk about peace without talking about conflict, and like, is it two sides of the same coin? Are they independent of one another? Like, I don't know what these answers are. But I can speak from my experience, and I believe that just from what I've gone through, like I can find moments of peace in the middle of the storm, like maybe it's the eye of the storm, if you will, with this metaphor. But like there are moments where I can exhale, and there's peace despite it all, even if it's really tough or really challenging. And I think one of the things that really led to that for me, especially over these last few years, I had a therapist who asked me a question similar to just like, would you be rather be doing anything different or something to that extent? And I was just like, because I was so overwhelmed, and like I felt like life was happening to me, I felt like out of control, and just kind of like and I was just like, you know what? It just kind of shifted my perspective. Like, no, I wouldn't be rather doing anything else. Like, I'm living with integrity and honesty, and I'm doing what I believe to be true, what's in line with my values and my morals. And I hate the struggle. Feels awful, but no, I wouldn't rather be doing anything else, that like this is so important to me. And I think that was a peaceful moment, like despite it all, that like it was a shift, and just how I kind of viewed things, that I was like, okay, I can do this now because I'm fighting the good fight without violence or aggression, to like be able to get to where I need to go with what I believe to be true, and what I could sleep at night with that, even though it's tough.
Now, that was beautiful and well said. And I'm telling you, I'll talk about this later on. I love your logo for Peace and Pathfinders. I love that. So I know I asked you earlier. I want to see that so I can draw it. Um, but there you go. So, ladies and gentlemen, you got a chance to see it. Um, I understand when an individual finds peace, but I would say 80%, and I'm lowballing this number, that most of the people that are in our life, including our children, including our family members and relatives and closest of friends, we live in a constant state of craziness. There's noise, irritation, and whatever. How do you find peace when you're surrounded by drama? And how do you silence the noise or teach those closest to you in your inner circle to
Mhm.
be at peace with you?
Yeah, I think it's an ongoing process. I am human, so I feel like I'm a work in progress or process, depending on how you view that. But I think it's to really kind of scale back as far as like what's going on here, like what are our needs, what are like our children's needs, and trying to go from there. Like I get frustrated because I also realize I have these expectations and I don't know where they come from. Maybe it's society, or maybe how I was brought up, or maybe they come from where I thought life would be like. I just thought it would be simpler, and it's not. And so like I I also recognize that I have these like expectations, and once I like readjust it, like I don't know why I think that, and this is where I'm at right now. Like maybe it'll get simpler at sometimes, but it always changes. It really is like weather, like one day can be this way, oh, a whole year of certain weather is happening, and that really seems to be how life kind of works. And so I feel like that flexibility and adaptability is like so key here. As much as I want to grasp or hold on to these ideas of life being simple, or like it should be this way, it should be that way, and just like I don't want to should myself, like. And so when I think about conflict, like in relationships and or what might be going on, I'm thinking about what I might need, and like, do I need to set some boundaries? Do I need to let go and give in a little bit here? Like, and I think that's the ultimate challenge, is to be able to stay connected to the people that we love and care about, and be able to have the hard conversations. whatever those may be, like politically or just like something happened in our relationship, but to be able to stay connected and to be open and receptive. We don't have to agree with each other, but to be able to have that. And I feel like as a culture, we're not taught how to do that. And it's extremely difficult. But at the same time, I think it's key, like so that we're not so divided, like within our families, within our communities, within our world in many ways. And if we're able to do that, to really start to understand each other, I feel like we're on to something as far as that peace and connection and really a sense of belonging, like to really kind of come together. And I think about that with like Maslow's hierarchy of needs in this triangle and how like love and belonging is one of the psychological needs and how important that is, just for humans. Um, yeah.
I think that was well said. And I have to introduce you to a friend of mine that's running for president, Sid McNary. He has a book for that's titled Art for Peaceful Living. He is a yogi instructor, very dynamic individual. And I know the first time I had him on, he talked about he wanted to find peace. I'm going, the world doesn't want peace. We live in conflict. Our whole history has been on, conflict and destroying, and who can stand on the throat of another country, another person, or whatever. And we still see that playing out right now.
Well, and I guess
What
the question for that too is that like, can peace exist without conflict? Like,
I'm
do we
gonna
only know peace because we have conflict? Like, are they related, in some way?
well see you speak a lot like me because I study human behavior, and I like to say I have neutral thinking. There's no right or wrong because I become a professional listener. I said, how do we come to the center? And everyone walk away with a piece of something that they really want and whatever. So there's not a winner or loser. Um, but I also know that um, I say this, and you've seen this in my text. You're only as strong as your last no.
Sure.
What happens in your life, and when you're advising people that there's no matter how committed you are to living a peaceful life and spreading peace, joy, and love on the others, we always have that one person, and it's normally someone that's extremely close to us. It could be our spouse, it could be someone we're dating, it could be one of our children, it could be our mother or father, aunts or uncles, or whatever, that just feels more comfortable with drama.
Sure.
What do you do about that? What should someone do about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many nuances in that and depending on the type of relationship. But I think it really comes down like, so the way I kind of evaluate that for myself is, like, the benefits, the overall, and kind of like looking at patterns within the relationship and like how beneficial is this relationship or not. We all have our strengths or like not weaknesses, but like growth edges, I like to say. And like we're people and we're humans and we're messy, and we're in relationships and it's chaotic. But so what do we do with that? And at the end of the day, like what would be the best for us or the best for these different relationships and really asking ourselves those questions. And like, so when I think about boundaries or where we are with people, and I feel like boundaries might be used a lot, but what I mean by that is this, like, where is our energy? Like, how do we feel when we're in relationships with certain people? Like, is it a lot of conflict? It doesn't mean that we have to necessarily cut people off completely either. Like, maybe it just means that we need to have them at a different psychological distance and somebody else who might be more fulfilling, meeting our relationship needs, possibly more so, and it's a better like quality relationship if I know that I can go to this person to lean on for emotional support about this one issue, maybe not about something else, but like in this regard, this is where our relationship certainly shines, where somewhere else our relationship shines in another way. Like I feel like there's always value in relationships, and conflict and experience can be our best teachers too. Some of the hardest times I've had in relationships have been the biggest teachers, for myself, and to be able to like kind of learn and grow, as a person too. I don't know if that really answers your question. I'm kind of like popping all over the place because it's hard
No,
without
you
specific
you
example.
you're
Yeah.
you're doing a great job. And believe it or not, you know, there's no answers without questions, and there's always going to be questions. And sometimes the answer is just being. Sometimes. Um, I love your field, and I've always wanted to ask this. You,
Yeah.
you talk to a lot of people. You carry a lot of people's, um, I say luggage. I won't say baggage with you because you're a good place to dump and tell the truth. Because most of us, because remember I said earlier, most of us are offended by something someone else says because we're not listening because we want to be heard. Um, Normally people come to you at their most vulnerable state, and you normally get, I would say 90% of the time, you get the truth or the truth they want to tell you. How do you live your life as a professional and not carry that luggage home with you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Because there's a lot of folks that have said, like, I don't know how you do your job. Like, I wouldn't want to listen to people's problems all day, and it's interesting to me because that's not my perspective on it, like I understand what people are saying. Like, I get that part. But like I think it's such an honor to be able to hear somebody's story. And like you said, especially if they're being vulnerable with me and maybe they've told me something that they've never told anybody before, and like and just to be it's just an honor to be included in on this step in their journey, wherever that may be, and for people to open up and for me to be there with them to kind of talk and get in the trenches, if you will, to like try to like work through things and to be there to help support them. And it's amazing to see what people can do, because they're certainly the ones that are making progress in their lives or moving forward. Like that's not me, but I'm here to like be able to help support them in that. And it's a gift really more than anything. And to like for people to go deep with me in this and to be emotionally vulnerable is quite an honor, and so like certainly like there like I think from an intellectual perspective, like it's also like challenging as far as just like, okay, we got this issue and I like to try to think creatively or I think out of the box or like think about other ways to kind of approach it and engage, different problems and stuff that might arise. But that personal connection is just always like, it's an honor to be a part of that in somebody's life, and however that may result or kind of move forward. And so to me, it's not draining in a sense of like, oh, here's somebody's problems, which I think a lot of people just think that's how I might be feeling or how they might be feeling in this role, when really I think of it much differently than that. And I do, like I do think about things as far as like, okay, I'm feeling stuck right here as probably all of us, when we're working and stuff like, okay, I want to be able to answer this question or how do we do this? How do we find peace? Like if I was working with somebody and trying to find more peace in our lives, like, okay, how do we do this within these circumstances, within these variables? Because everybody's different too. We all have different identities and how we interact with the world and perceive the world is different from each other. And there's also similarities. And it's just, to me, it's an art, it's almost like, it's like improv. Like if I was a jazz musician and riffing, and to be able to like create the space to have this experience with somebody in their life going through a difficult time, most likely, to kind of help them to get to the other side in whatever way I can.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking to Dr. Jodi Bremer. She is a clinical psychologist. Is that right?
Counseling psychologist, yeah.
Say that again.
A counseling psychologist.
Counseling psychologist. She's also a good friend, and the reason why I have her on here because peeling back the layers of a personal relationship, she's a person that's very passionate about her craft and her art. She is committed to her craft and to her clients. And she is a person, not a game changer. She's a life changer. And the reason why I had her on here because she has some habits that she's going to share with you that are key to her success. And before we go on and find out those habits, I'd like to let people know, Jodi, how do people get in touch with you?
They can, so I've developed Peace Pathfinders, and that's my website, peacepathfinders.com. And there's a way to contact me on there. Because this is really a business and organization community, really, to help bring people together to talk about peace and have that connection. And there's, a number of different ways to do that. And so that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me, to check out the website. And then there's, contact us form on there as well.
And I will make sure that in the description, when it goes to RMK Productions and Network on our YouTube page, that your contact information is on there. Now, I've asked you this in private. I'm going to ask you this in public, and because I'm kind of nudging you, because I know you have a podcast
Mhm.
that is working right now. You're developing that, but you should also have a book. All right. And I know you've got several that you're working on, but we just need one out first.
Yes.
Um, if you were to release a book and right now, what would the title of that book be, and what would the content of that book, so we can anticipate and put some pressure on you to get that book done?
So, so I think that the main book would be kind of just as far as like Peace Pathfinders, how it came to be, but really like I'm just really interested in like the nuts and bolts of peace, to be able to kind of come back, like to tap into like peace leaders and how we're not having these conversations anymore and the state of, us, our world, our communities, and to be in ways to be able to cultivate peace internally, within ourselves, that emotional state, and then also outwardly in our relationships. And I'm certainly not the expert on all things, but I have, a lens that which I can look at things and to be able to provide some information, but I really want to be able to bring people together to both be teachers and students, to learn from and to teach one another, it's from our shared experience base. And so this book would be really diving deep into more of like some ideas that I have and questions, from the audience who may be reading or listening to an audiobook version of that, to really go into the details of all this. Because I feel like, especially like when we're standing up for certain causes or just in our personal life or whatever kind of level we're at, it's so important. Like, how can we do this? Like, what is it, the nuts and bolts about peace? How can we do this peacefully? What is that magic that makes it happen? Like, regardless of the content, content's important, but like, how do we do that? Like, non-violently, not aggressively, but standing up for what we believe in, our morals and values, and so this book will like open the door to some ways to be able to do that, and then to also ask more questions and to kind of bring people together.
All right. And tell us about your podcast and where we can find it.
The podcast, and so it should be on all like the main podcasting platforms and stuff. I created it on Podbean, so that's a quick go-to where you can also access it in other places as well. But it's called Peace Pathfinders podcast, so that's also available. Everything is kind of set up, but we're really starting to kind of launch it in different areas. So this is really the beginning, which is very exciting to be able to kind of bring people together to really be catalysts and change, or like a peace movement, to really bring people together, which I feel like we really need, internally for ourselves and in society. And I also have this peace share, like a creative collaborative. I can't wait till that takes off also, because it's about really asking people to contribute other ways that they might be expressing themselves with peace or connection. And that could be through like photos or paintings or drawings or poetry or stories, and to be able to like have this exchange, among people as well.
All right. I'm going to do a quick like round robin type of thing of trying to find answers to issues that we are struggling with. I know for me, and I know this podcast is not about me. I experienced in 2022, I was racially attacked at work by someone, and what I had to go through took me almost a year to go through it, because I thought I had did the things in order for me not to always be recognized as a criminal or a deviant or whatever. I was invited to leave the country, or I should have been gifted and blessed to be part of this, and be thankful that people like me were allowed to be in this country. And I know that it threw me for a loop. So
Sure.
I know that we are divided in this country. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. One, I'll start with race. How do we bring people together when this conversation has divided so many of us? And so many of us are, when we talk about mental illness, that we cannot overcome the fact that the history of slavery either exists or doesn't exist. We can't. We struggle with the fact that the contributions of a group of people are not considered as contributions to this
Right.
country. We struggle with the fact that our the way that we identify ourselves our sexuality or how we want to be recognized, or even with the fact that do we have freedom of choice when it comes to our own body? How do we find peace within any of that noise?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I can see feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of that too, especially when we're talking about like systemic racism or things that are like outside of our control, but also like some things that are everything that's so important to us too. And so I think that finding peace within that, and this is another reason why I think it'd be great for people to kind of come together to have more of these conversations. But I think what it comes down to, and that's what I'm so interested in, is to be able the nuts and bolts of peace is like, okay, this is where we're at in this moment in time within this institution, within this system, with the color of our skin, our sexuality, or wherever we may be. And so, what can we do with where we're at? And I think that's the number one question, and so like, and then we can kind of pick and choose our battles and prioritize what's important to us now, so like, so to be able to kind of break it down, because I feel like if we're feeling overwhelmed by things, like I might be projecting that, but like I feel like it's just easier for me to break it down into steps as far as what I can do, what I have control over, and what's realistic, and
Right.
so like, so I'm so if we're in like an institution and there's racism and like, so I don't know the specifics of all this obviously, but like, so how are we managing that on a day-to-day basis, like how can we sleep at night and know that we're doing the best that we can within in this environment that we're in, and in these situations. And then and to be able just to kind of survive these moments in time, because I feel like it can kind of fluctuate. Like, how can we survive given these experiences to get out or get through or get somewhere else for change to happen, and to be able to have maybe more of a solid foundation if you want to, like to fight the fight as far as pushing back within the system, outside of the system, whatever is safest, but also to be able so that your voice is heard too, because your voice is just as important as anybody else's, and same with everybody, and that's what I'm so interested in, is like, how do we do that, whatever it is that we really feel strongly about, whatever is really important to us and our values, to be able to have these conversations, to stay connected so that people can hear us and so that we can also hear them, and to be able to have this exchange, to be able to kind of come to some kind of common ground, or to initiate change, and change doesn't necessarily happen overnight. But if we're contributing to the larger good and pushing our efforts into the change that we want to see, I feel like sometimes that's all we can do, and like, and maybe that we can at least rest at night knowing that we did something. Like sometimes it's as simple as not being silent, and speaking up, like, and just not letting something pass in like a staff meeting or whatever might be happening. Like, it's very easy just to like sit back and just let something pass. But I think it's a form of standing up for what we believe, and when we just break that silence, even, even if it's not something huge, like in the moment, but there's a ripple effect, I feel like, in many ways.
Please don't be offended. This is February, Black History Month, and I'm going to say what you just said is Black history. Thank you for being part of history. The second part, and it's going to be a couple other parts, relationships, dating apps, and dating. The world of dating is a multi-billion-dollar business. Everyone's trying to find the one, the perfect one. Everyone's struggling with the one that they have. Everyone's struggling with the one that they lost. Everyone's struggling with the issues of the one that they have. Um, how do you find peace? Either going into a relationship or being into a relationship or finding a relationship. Where does peace lie?
Yeah. Um, it's a good question. I think, and yeah, it's hard to answer without like details or specific examples. But I think that's just it,
Well, let me help you out a little bit from here and give you some thought. I wrote in one of my books is I said men are only as loyal as their options. The more options we have, we tend not to make decisions. But with the dating apps that are going through, I hear people all the time. They find the one, and then
Mhm.
Friday night they look up and someone has jumped into their DM or whatever, and then they go out with the other one. but they don't want to tell the one because they're trying to find out the one. And I don't even know if the one ever exists. So the options of that, we're all looking for someone that, has a perfect six pack, has a nice hourglass figure, perfect hair, perfect job. I have a young lady that she only wants to date someone rich. And she says she's going to marry an Indian prince. And I said, do you know that princes normally have more than one wife? She goes, no, I'm going to be the only one. I said, how are you going to change cultural thinking? There's a lot, especially with our young people going into dating. You know, there are more young ladies at the ages of 9 to 12 that are showing pictures of themselves that only your bubble water should see, to little boys that are sharing them on the internet and whatever. How do we find peace and explain that when it comes to the art of dating and creating functional relationships early on? Let's talk to the young people.
Okay. So yes, I think this is so I guess it would help if I kind of gave more of like how I might be viewing relationships in general. Like I feel there's a lot of cultural push to find like the one or like happily ever after, or it's reflected in different ways. Like, okay, we're just gonna meet this person and we're gonna be lifelong partners and that's it. You know, um, but I don't know if that's necessarily true. Like obviously that doesn't happen all the time, but just with divorce rates and everything else. But like and relationships starting and ending all the time, but at the same time, like, what about just kind of, I'm thinking about just broadening our perspective on relationships and like, I've been in different relationships throughout my life, and trying to generalize it, even like friendships, or I can think about romantic relationships, and they change, right? That like I can say I was in a romantic relationship for a period of time that didn't work for me overall. Like maybe it's not the one, but like it also served this moment in time, within my lifespan, and like maybe that's where I was at that time. I feel like we try to make the most well-informed decisions with what we have at that time. Hindsight, I could tell you all kinds of things I would do differently, but like, but we're there and like developmentally, if we're just thinking about how we grow and learn over time and evolve or devolve or however we want to look at it, like these are people and relationships in our life like across the lifespan too. And maybe that's what it need to be at that time just for the sake of that, and we learned from that and we grew from that or not, depending on where we're at. And maybe that's just part of it all altogether, and so if we're looking online and dating apps and we're like, okay, trying to navigate and go like, I feel like it's like shopping, like connect with people and stuff because it's kind of a numbers game before you can kind of take off with different relationships. But isn't that what it's all about? Like there's chemistry, and like, there's another question, like, what does that even mean? Is that pheromones? Is that connection? Like, we can go down a rabbit hole in my mind, as far as like, what does chemistry really mean? But that connection, that like sometimes we get it, and that's the good stuff when it works out in relationships, and hopefully that lasts forever, but like not all the times, and every relationship ebbs and flows, um, and I remember hearing somebody talk about like long-term partnership and like what, and somebody asking like how do you do it, and they're like, I think the key is that like neither one of us fell out of love at the same time, you know and so like I just think that was very simple and yet profound. Maybe it doesn't answer the entire question, but like otherwise, we have like maybe they like us, we don't like them. We like them, they don't like us. Maybe we both don't like each other, but then the magic happens when we like each other. But then, okay, then there's the rest of the relationship, whether it's the next week, month, 10 years, however that is, and how that all kind of plays out and the dynamics too. And maybe that's just what we needed in order to get to that next step in our lives, I guess. I see it more of a, I guess, as in a journey, and it's a part of the process, whatever that means.
I love the way that you phrase that and you connect everything together. It felt good. I felt warm in that conversation. Um, Life begins and life ends, and then life continues after we're gone. People go to dark places when we lose someone. And when
Yeah,
you talk about peace and you're the survivor of a loss,
yeah.
um, what how do we deal with that? I know the five emotions that we go through when we lose someone, but how do we find peace and how do we come out to the other side that we start living again? what would be your advice?
I mean, when I'm thinking about grief, I feel like grief never goes away. Like there might be this expectation of like, when am I going to be over this? Or like other people might tell us that, like, you really need to get through this. Or like, why are you still crying? Or like, like it's an interesting, loss is and grief is very interesting and it's very complex too. Like you might be laughing and grieving, like and thinking about fond memories. And it's certainly a process. And I feel like we can get stuck in grief, at times. And maybe it helps to kind of like try to work through that to keep moving forward. Doesn't mean it's like going to be over necessarily. Like the loss isn't going away. It's lost, like, um, but I think I mean, this is just, like a simple answer, but so we can certainly talk more about that too. But I don't know, when I think about death and loss and grieving, like I find some comfort and maybe peace, if you will, and just knowing that the relationship doesn't end. It just changes. Like I might be talking to the person that passed still. I might be still connected to them in different ways. I might be going to visit them at a grave or, where their ashes might be or just in memory, but like our relationship with the person who's passed doesn't go away. And I find some comfort in that, despite what we believe or not believe about afterlife, and there can be comfort in other ways, certainly too. But as far as like the grieving process, I think that there's comfort and just knowing that connection can still exist, even if the person's not here physically anymore.
Jody, I'm so glad you're my friend because damn, you're good. You put me out of work. You're this that damn good. Now I'm going to get you on this one. All right,
All right,
going to
let's
get you on this one because so far we align up, and I've learned something from you today. All right, so how do you find peace and success? I know a lot of people that have hit the lottery when it comes to their entrepreneurship and they change. They turn into a whole nother beast.
Yeah,
A solid relationship based on finances all of a sudden changes to a relationship that is standing on a shaky foundation.
yeah,
People's egos and whatever. And then, I always say, as fast as you rise, you come down faster. And a lot of times when you come down that fast, there's no one there to catch you. All
yeah.
right. Let's talk about finding peace with success.
Yeah. So that's a good one. I think I think a lot of it has to go with how we define success for us, and like I feel like there's so many things that the culture throws at us, our families, as far as how we define success or what we should define as success. Like, and what you're talking about, it sounds like money, like money and fame are success. Like, okay, we could do a PowerPoint presentation on that or a show on that or something about like how this means success. And I feel like there's a lot of pressure to define it a certain way. But is that true for us on an individual basis? Does that line up with like what we cherish, what we savor, what we want in this life? Like it doesn't mean like money and fame is not, like maybe it can contribute to like other things that we might find as successful or what's important to us in life. But I think where it comes down to, like for me and just making decisions in general, it's like where I find that my heart and my head are on the same page. So I could say like that logically that makes sense. Money and fame equals success. I could tell you that. But like do I feel that in my heart? Do I feel like that would be success for me? Or where do I find success? Because me personally, I think it's in the relationships that I have and the quality that I had. And like we talked about the TBI, and mine happened in 2008, 2009. But like, so like at that time, like, and if you have these like near death experiences, it really puts a laser focus on like what's important in life, and for me, I was like, what is it all about, and it wasn't from a morbid or depressive weight stance. It was more just out of curiosity, and it just came to like the relationships are important to me in my life, and so I think so I would make sure that my head and heart are on the same page when we're talking about success or what that might mean for me or like anybody if I'm talking to somebody else, because we can say, oh, I want the money and the fame, and that sounds good. This is what culture's telling us, and I want this new car, like I want these material things. And maybe that's true for some people. I'm not saying it's not. But also like maybe somebody just appreciates being outside more than anything, and that takes away from those experiences if we're schmoozing and socializing, in a different way that's not really, we're not on our head and our heart aren't on the same page, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Let me say this. I'm going to tell you, I couldn't have said it better. I would like to say it better, but you said the same thing. Because I know that I say this all the time. At the end of the day, I think Denzel Washington said, "You'll never see a U-Haul behind a funeral procession because you can't take it with you." But what's really important, you said it, and I'm going to give you credit for it. I'm not going to take credit for it, even though um, I've said this in my own personal life. What I've learned when the world
Okay.
was falling apart around me is that what was really important was the people that were in my inner circle, the experiences and stories that I tell of those experiences. Had nothing to do with what I've accomplished financially, what I've accomplished as far as my career, but it was the experiences and the people I shared it with. So this show, this special episode, is about the secrets to people's success or people that are highly effective in their lives. And it had nothing to do with money, which you basically, I mean, this is like throwing, a bullseye every single time. You hit it one after another, one after another.
Okay.
But I want to know your secrets to success. So I'm going to paint a little picture for you. All right, because I read in a book in order for us to come together, that humanity has to be destroyed as the life that we live. I don't know if that's true, but someone put it in a book. But in the event, there was a 17-year-old child that believed they were the only survivors of this planet, and they were on an island, and come to shore was a bottle. And then the message in the bottle was your secrets to finding peace. And this person, the world right now, everyone that's listening to this podcast right now is going to be standing at the edge of the beach with the water running upon their feet, and this bottle is going to come up at their toes, and they're going to pick it up, and they're going to pull this message out of the bottle. What would that message say from my good friend Jodi on how to find peace if we were starting all over again?
Yeah. Um, I think the first step would be just defining peace for you. That I think it can be a very personal definition in how we define peace. Um, and then to go with that, to like find ways in order to find peace in our lives. For me, it would be like inner peace and like that emotional state and trying to find that balance. And then also like outwardly in relationships in the community and the world and just kind of noticing that relationship between our inner and outer world. But for somebody else, it might be something different, and if peace means for somebody else like the absence of conflict, or like another way to kind of define it for them, then I would go in that way, to kind of see if peace exists there. But I can also see just having working definition too. So my short answer is just to define peace, what peace is for you, and then to go after it and see if that works. And I think experience is going to be the one that tells you whether that's a good fit for you or not.
Well, Jodi, Dr. Jodi, I hope that we get to it before the world comes to an end. But I hope people get your message one more time. How do people get in touch with you?
Peacepathfinders.com.
And we can find your podcast on
On
Peapod.
Podbean. It's also on my website too. There's like the podcast you can connect with on the different platforms also.
All right. And when should we expect your book? I'm putting pressure on you.
I'm working on it. I don't know, but it's coming. It'll be out.
All right. Maybe when I start my next podcast, he said, she says, we'll bring you on in order to find out what she says versus what he says, and have some fun. You've given us a lot of information. You've shined a light on some dark spaces in the conversations that we need to have. You've also opened not only my eyes, but I believe our listeners' eyes, um, to looking at the world and looking at our relationships and looking at ourselves a little bit differently. When you talk about being the change that you want to see,
Hmm.
being the voice, silence is dangerous. Allow yourself to be heard. You gave us a lot of information, useful information. And I hope that if anyone ever reaches out to Jodi and has a conversation, just remember she cares. And that's what makes her so special. And that's the reason why She is one of the top 100 people that I'm showcasing to show that how effective they are in life and their secrets to success. Dr. Jodi, thank you for being a guest. There's a welcome mat here. You're always welcome to come back and talk about anything you want to do. When your podcast gets up and rolling and whatever, I'd like to have you back to help promote you on that podcast. I would like to have you back when you get your book done and give you 6 months to do it. I know it takes years for me to write. So I'm just putting a little pressure, poking you just a little bit. But I hope our listeners enjoyed it. We've covered a lot of information here. Let me back up just 1 second. Is there anything that you want to leave our guests with? And I'm going to ask you another question, which I forgot. Anything you want to leave our guests with?
I just wish for peace in and peace out, just very simply for people
All
to be
right.
able to find that and that connection.
And on my normal show, I always ask this question. And the reason why I ask this question, because people that follow RMK Productions or any of my podcasts that subscribe, I always say that, they're not people that drive by an accident, they stop to help. If you had one wish, one dream, or one ask, A-S-K, I don't want anyone to cancel me because they said I said a bad word. Ask. If you had one ask, and it could be more than that, what would your one ask be?
I think my one ask is to join me in the Peace Pathfinders community, which should be launching pretty soon, to be able to start having these conversations and coming together to be the catalysts and change, for more peace and connection, within and outwardly in our relationships and world.
All right. I have a little bit of a dream. One day I'm going to have a stadium or someplace that we're going to have not only the people that have been hosting on my show, but co-hosting on my show, but also featured guests. In order just to be in the audience to let people get to know us, I'm going to ask you to be part of that when I put that together. So to my listeners, I want to thank you for sitting in and listening. You may be driving, you may be tending to your kids, you may take a small lunch break and listen to this podcast, and I want to thank you. If you like what you've heard, go to RMK Productions and Network on our YouTube page. And again, if you're a person with a high call to action, I ask that you subscribe. If you're a person that found this conversation worth sharing, I will ask you to share. If you would like to be a guest on any of my podcasts, go to info@rmkproductions.org. And again, my name is Kevin McLemore, and I should have said that at the top of the show, but you guys have seen me enough. This is RMK Productions and 10 United Podcast Network, and we want to thank you, Dr. Jodi, for coming in, sitting with us, and giving us so much information. I couldn't have said any of this better than what you did today, and I just want to thank you. Thank you.
Thank you too. It's been really an honor. I really appreciated talking to you again and to be able to do this. Thank you.
No problem. Like I said, I got some powerful people in my circle of friends and people that actually care about humanity and are definitely making a difference in the way that they walk through this life. This is an example of the person that you would like to be, Dr. Jodi Bremer. So again, my grandfather always said, when you get to a place in life where you can help someone else out, it is your duty to do so. Reach one, teach one. And with that, we'll fade to black and we're out.